Okay, so when we say now, what do we mean? This moment. Definition in the Oxford Dictionary is at the present time or moment. So very good, David. You've got it. So now is not in the future or in the past. Okay? A minute from now isn't now. And a minute ago isn't now. A second from now isn't now. A second ago isn't now. Got that? Yeah. Do you all agree? Yeah. Okay, right. So even a millionth of a second from now isn't now. It's in the future. A millionth of a second in the future. And a millionth of a second ago in the past is in the past, right? So, if you really think about it, your mind kind of gets a bit frazzled. As it happens, other people have thought about it. Aristotle and St. Augustine recognized that time has three parts: the past, the present, now, and the future. And interestingly, the past is only perceived through remembering present impressions of things. So our memory creates our perception of the past. Because the present is very short. In fact, it has no time, which is very weird if you think about it. Because any time forward is the future, and any time back is the past. So the present is like now. Like a series of very infinitely small slices of reality. Okay? And the future, so the past is perceived through remembering present impressions, even incredibly tiny things. And the future is an expectation, that this thing or idea or impression that you have in the present will exist later. That's how we think about the future. So, Aristotle saw that the present exists for no time at all. And he talked of the present as a knife edge of time, not a part of it, just some slice in between past and present, past and future. So, who here likes music? Yeah, quite a lot of you, right? You're into music. But how can you appreciate melody if you hear just one note of it now? And now, and now. How can you appreciate it? Actually, appreciation of melody comes from catching the impression of notes now and remembering them as part of the whole, and the expectation of the refrain that you're listening to unfolding in the future. Right? You got that? So you're catching it somehow, you're connecting it into your memory, and through your memory you realize there's a kind of flow of music doing this and that, and then you're guessing, okay, the next bit's going to happen later. That's how you appreciate melody, because otherwise if we wouldn't appreciate melody, if we just stopped now, we only remembered the past, for example, or if we only had appreciation of the future but didn't have any memory of the past. So you've caught the notes now, and you can appreciate the future potential because you've attached them to your memory. So my dad actually passed away a long time ago now, 2007. And he had a huge collection of classical music and loved listening to it all the time. In fact, I've got my appreciation of classical music from him. He used to have these LPs, 33 revolutions a minute. And he'd play them all evening when he came home from work and all weekend. So we got to know the music, a lot. And he loved classical music. He died from a series of strokes, one more severe than the other. And one thing I noticed was that at some point, his sense of time collapsed. He wasn't sure what time of day it was, even whether it's morning or evening, or even what time of year it was. And at that point, actually, his appreciation of music stopped. He didn't want us to listen to any more music at all. It didn't mean anything to him. And I think that's because he couldn't perceive it set out in time anymore. kind of shell? Scallop, isn't that? Uncle Paul, he's very knowledgeable. Yeah, scallop shell. So, does it exist now? Yeah? Who put your hands up if you think it exists now? Okay. Yes, yes, it exists now. So, think about this very carefully. Does it still exist a minute ago? Not did it exist a minute ago, but does it still exist a minute ago? No. Who says yes? Who says no? Right. Everyone else hasn't a clue, right? Okay. So, does it slip into the past? Or does it keep sliding forward into the future so that it can keep existing now? What do you think?
Yes.
It slides forward and it keeps existing now.
Imagine what's going to happen later. It might fall down and crack and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's here right now.
Here, right now, it's here. So somehow it exists in the past. It did exist in the past, we know that. But it's still here in the present. It's kind of moving forward with us through time, right? So, if it exists now, does it exist? Does it exist a minute from now? Not will it exist, but does it actually exist a minute from now in time? No. Right. Very philosophical about it. Just let you think about that. So let's pretend that this scallop shell is a 30 million year old fossil. 30 million year old. Right. So did it exist 30 million years ago? Yes. Did it exist 31 million years ago? No. Does it exist now? Yes. Yes. So we're pretending it's a 30 million year old fossil. So yes, it's in my hand, right? So 30 million years ago, what enabled it to exist now if it was a fossil?
It was found.
Right? What?
Because we found it, that's why it existed.
It was found, yeah. So, but how? Why was it found?
Somebody looked for it.
Yeah, but what about its own nature? Something about its own nature allows it to exist now. Generally, we can say there were some conditions which occurred allowing its existence now, right? Something allowed it to exist all that time, 30 million years, until now. Actually, scallop shells are made of what? Do you know? Yeah, calcium carbonate, a certain kind called calcite. And it's a very hard material. So often fossils are created because the animal that they are from was buried in some sand or silt, and the soft tissue was replaced by hard sedimentary deposits. And that's actually what we see in a fossil. So the quality of hardness allows it to exist now, for all that time. It has to be pretty hard. If it's just a soft thing, it won't exist for so long, it'll just degrade. It has to be durable to be able to exist after 30 million years, right? So material things then need to be made of something durable in order to last, right? Generally speaking. So like a diamond, for example. A diamond can last a long time because why?
Made of carbon.
Made of carbon. But the carbon actually has a very special form. Its outer structure of electrons is such that it makes a tetrahedral structure, a tetrahedron. And that's very, very strong. So the bonds between the carbon atoms are so strong that they won't be kind of invaded by anything else. And that's why it's so hard, and that's why it's so durable. Right? Diamonds come from the center of the earth somewhere. So it can last a long time because the bonds between these carbon atoms are almost unbreakable. So think about Stonehenge, or what about the pyramids? They lasted because they're made of a material which has very strong bonds in the material itself, which allows them to weather the storms and whatever. Right? So there was a king called Ramesses II, pharaoh, He lived 1279, and he reigned 1279 to 1213 BC. He was called Ramesses the Great. He's actually often regarded as the greatest, most celebrated, and most powerful pharaoh in the most powerful period of ancient Egypt. So he was super pharaoh, really powerful, strong pharaoh. So he's called Ramesses the Great. And actually the Greek version of his name was Ozymandias. And this is a poem with that title by Percy Shelley. I'll just read you the poem, it's very short. And it's about Ramesses II, called Ozymandias. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, lone and level sands stretch far away." It's a great poem. It's full of irony, right? Because Ramesses was very, very powerful, but all that was left in this poem was these legs of stone and a face and this message saying, "Look on my works, ye mighty, in despair." There's nothing else. It all faded away into the desert. So why do things crumble? Why do things crumble?
Erosion. Erosion.
Erosion, yes. So the surroundings basically will try to invade them chemically and break them apart. You know, weather, water, oxidation, oxygen, which makes things rot, and so on. In the end, actually, everything crumbles and fades. Even pyramids, even Stonehenge will go. And it's the law of physics. It's the second law of thermodynamics, which says that things just break up. So to last, even for some time, things need to be able to resist change, right? Now, if you want to last, you've got to resist change. So that's for material things. So what about non-material things? You know, actually, non-material things divide into three types of thing. Intellectual things like ideals, ideas, and beliefs. Actionable things like altruism, dependability, generosity, courage, charity. And things based on heart like integrity, love, hope, forgiveness. So I'm just looking at the good qualities. There are also really bad, non-material qualities. I'm just looking at the good things now. All of these things are manifested in a good nation's culture. Ideals, ideas, beliefs, altruism, generosity, courage, and so on. Integrity, love, hope, forgiveness. So, like music, because culture is a kind of a I'm talking about like non-physical culture. I don't mean things like, you know, paintings or something like that. But culture has a manifestation in the present, right? Like music, in the present now. So for its continued existence, it needs to exist in people's memory. And there needs to be an expectation of it manifesting in the future. Right? So we have a culture that we live in this country, for example. Or we have a culture in our movement, in our church. We have a little family culture here in River South. And that's manifested, you know, now, all the time. And we kind of pick it up and we put it into our memory. We have a certain feeling about it. We have a certain expectation for the future in it, right? Same way as with music. And to endure for a long time, it needs to be passed on generation by generation. It has to go into the future somehow for it to make any difference whatsoever. So that reminds me of a joke. After a very long and boring sermon, I hope not this one, the parishioners filed out of the church saying nothing to the preacher who was standing by the door. Towards the end of the line, there was a thoughtful person who always commented on the sermons. He said, "Pastor, today your sermon reminded me of the peace and love of God." The pastor was thrilled. He said, "No one has ever said anything like that about my preaching before. Tell me why." "Well, it reminded me of the peace of God because it passed all understanding, and the love of God because it endured forever." Right. So, if a good culture is going to help humankind grow, it also needs to be curable and to resist degradation, right? Just like diamonds or pyramids. It has to gain an aspect that enables it to retain its integrity, I mean, the state of being whole and undivided and not broken up. So, a culture itself is created or comprised of a society of people expressing that culture through thoughts and actions and heart and the things they do to create that culture. And of course, the strongest and most fundamental structure of society is the family. Right? So a good culture and all the non-material aspects of it are durable if the family unit is strong. Right? We agree with that. So for the family unit to be strong, it needs to form a four-position foundation, what we learn in the principle. That is, the relationship between the parents, the children, and God. It forms a certain kind of relationship. And that relationship forms, surprise, surprise, tetrahedron. You draw it in 2 dimensions, but actually it's a tetrahedron. Just like the diamond we talked about. So there's a kind of a structure that's really important. It's important in nature, also it's important kind of spiritually or internally. And in this structure, these bonds of heart that we have in a family can be very strong, creating a stable, loving environment for children to develop their own love. So, as units in the four-position foundation, we, as individuals, need to focus on developing our children's love, our filial love, couples love, and parental love. So we can create strong bonds of heart with each other. And as we move through time, the parents will still have those strong bonds with their parents. They build them up. And this dynamic between grandparents and parents and grandchildren is the starting point for the family culture to be able to last through the generations and create a stable societal and national culture also. The carbon atoms form bonds in a diamond through an exchange of energy, simply speaking. And the key to the family forming bonds is the exchange of love, which comes from God. So we'll see in my principle, you can see that there's a number of things that come from God, which is energy and love, plus other things. So this is really an amazing point of view, actually, which has been revealed through the divine principle. Some people know that the family is important, right? They kind of know. But why? It's actually very clear why. When you look at the family structure through the eyes of the principle, we form these very strong bonds of love between us. We can do. And those strong bonds allow us to create a certain culture, a certain standard and values, which then can last. If those bonds aren't strong, they won't last. That's why we say that the family is the core building block of our society. Why we emphasize the importance of parent-child relationship with grandparents. The first gen, like us old fogies, we have the faith, right, in some way. We're all here after many things. Now it's a matter of passing that on. Because the fall cut us off from God, parents need to create new foundations of faith, which we're trying to do. In other words, new bonds of love with God, which they can pass on to their children. So that's the key point. How to create these bonds of love with God, and how we can pass those bonds on to our children, and our children's children, and our children's children's children. So, in conclusion, to enable the culture in our nation, or even our church, to last through time into the future, our families need to focus on loving God, and by doing that, loving each other. It's that simple. It's not actually complicated. But also, of course, it's quite hard work when we're coming out of a fallen world and we're still surrounded by it in some kinds of way. Okay, thank you very much. Short but sweet. Just finish with a prayer. Morning, dear Heavenly Parent. Thank you so much for this opportunity to come together as a community, to create a loving family culture. And I pray, Father, you can really guide us in this time, that we can always know that the most important thing is to come closer to you, to be able to love you and receive your love, and to love those people around us, in our families, in our wider community, so that we can create a culture of heart and love. Father, we thank you so much for your blessings, and really pray you and guide us through this week and in all the things we're doing now. I pray this in the name of the Central First Family. Adieu.